Our road trip today takes us to Moundsville, West Virginia, where we are going to look at the old Indian mounds that the ancient Indians built along the Ohio River. And we're also going to look at the old West Virginia Penitentiary. They're right beside each other. So this is the bridge that we're going to take over across the Ohio River. As you can see, it's lightly snowing. Here it is in April, first week in April, and it's still very, you might not be able to see it, but it's very lightly snowing. Very windy day also. So we're going to take the bridge across the Ohio River. We're on the Ohio side, and we're going to go over to Moundsville, West Virginia. A lot of history along the Ohio River, and it doesn't get any older than the mounds that the ancient Indians built. We're going to climb up also to the top of the mound. There was almost, I hate to say it, but there's almost hurricane winds today. It was unbelievable. April, with the wind chill factor, it felt like minus 10 degrees. You've always got to put factor in the wind chill factor. But I went ahead and climbed the mound anyhow, even though there must have been 60-mile-an-hour winds up there. So here we are. We're coming into Moundsville, West Virginia. And the official name of the mound is Grave Creek Mound. They say this goes back to before Jesus, maybe 100 years before Jesus was born. Over the centuries here in American history, there has been lots of changes. I mean, the first settlers here, the first European settlers, actually dug a hole into the mound and found the burial site. Must have been a chief at the bottom. And we'll go later on. They also have a museum here, and we're going to go in the museum, and I'm also going to show some facts about what was inside the mound. But first, before we go over the facts and go in the museum, we'll go ahead and walk to the top of the mound here. So they got some steps. You'll see it coming up pretty soon. The steps wind around the mound. And there's the bridge in the background. There's the bridge that we came over. So here we go. These are the steps at the bottom of the mound, and we're just going to head on up there. So, what do you think? Pretty cool, huh? These are old stone stairs, and you got a pretty good view of the old penitentiary over there. Later on in the video, we'll have close-up pictures and video of the old penitentiary. But we're almost at the top. You can see there on the side, there was an older wall, an older rock wall they built probably 100 years ago. We're heading up to the top of the mound, the Indian Mound. Those buildings at the bottom, they're abandoned now. They must have been probably from the early 1900s. Because this has been a tourist attraction for over 100 years. That's hard. It's kind of hard to imagine in Middle America, a tourist attraction going back over 100 years, but that's what we're looking at. So now we're at the top of the mound. We got a bird's eye view of Moundsville, West Virginia. It's kind of cool because it was so windy. I had the whole mound to myself. Yeah, had the whole Indian Mound to myself. Felt like the chief. Maybe I was the chief of Moundsville for one day. Here we go. And we got this monument up here. I believe the monument, we'll get a close look on it, but if my memory serves me right, the monument was put in there in the 1940s. We'll get a close up here in a second. Now, a lot of people might be asking, well, what happened to all the Indians? Well, the Indians along the Ohio River and back east, for the most part, just got phased out. They were pushed to the west. As the European came in, they were just pushed west. And of course there were Indian wars, of course, and they lost some of the Indian wars. And then you had disease. You had the diseases that the Europeans were immune to, but when the Indians came in contact with the Europeans, they had no immunity to the disease. Oh, there we go, 1942. And the Indians had no immunity to some of the diseases that Europeans had, and they died out. But a lot of them were sent west to Oklahoma. There were some. So when the Europeans came in, they kind of like just pushed them out of the way. I mean, through war and disease, and if the war didn't get them, and the disease didn't get the Indians, and then they were pushed to Oklahoma. Some even went down to Florida too. So so much for that Indian history lesson. So here's the pictures of the penitentiary from on top of the mound. Really is a nice trip. I recommend going in the summertime. They got areas there for picnics. I mean, you can take your whole family there, the children, do a picnic. It really will be a cool day trip, a road trip. As you can see, those hills, those buildings at the bottom of the mound are abandoned stone structures. Some last pictures of the mound. Now we're going inside the museum. These would have been the canoes, the dugout canoes that the Indians would have went up and down the local streams, the Ohio River. Now this is a very interesting stone. They might have cracked the nuts on there. And then I'm just going to show you what people think the houses might have looked like. This is what the historians think that this is what the houses that the Indians lived in along the Ohio River. This is what they might have looked like. Remember, the mound is a burial site. There was one set of skeletons in there. I believe there's only one set of skeletons in there, and that probably had to be the big chief. Too bad we don't know what the big chief's name was. But again, this is how the historians envision the Indians living, killing the mastodon, fishing. Now remember when George Washington came to the Ohio River in around 1750, he was amazed at all the animals and the wildlife. I mean, there was trees galore, the big river. See, Ohio River actually is an Indian word for big river. That's what Ohio means, big river, in the ancient Indian dialect. So, I mean, but George Washington came to the area, and it was just amazing, the amount of wildlife that the Indians had no shortage of food, I can tell you that much. And they had the great rivers and streams. This is what they said was inside the mound. Remember, the first European to settle in the area, he dug a hole through the mound. Or maybe it was his son that maybe his son or his grandson. They dug a hole in the mound. They said, we're going to figure out what's in there. Okay, so enough of the Grave Creek Mound. Now we're going to go on to the West Virginia Penitentiary. Get some close-up looks, maybe drive around the side. And see what, now you could take a tour in here. A lot of people, it's very, very popular. If you're going to go to Moundsville and you're going to make a day of it, you might as well take the tour inside the penitentiary. So here we go. Here in a bit, we're going to take a little drive on the side of the penitentiary, get a little better view of the side entrance. Now here we go. We're going to go along. I think this gate here is maybe where they brought in the prisoners, or when the law enforcement were coming in for whatever reason. We'll see some signs as we go up here. So I thought we'd just drive along here and take a look. This must have been the old guard shack. Like I said, the car, you know, maybe when the old bus loads of convicts were coming in. Can you imagine the conditions in there? They probably also put them on the road gang. The prisoners were probably coming in and out of here daily on some old truck or old bus, taking them on the, fixing up the roads, working them on the side of the road. So here we go. This is one of the entrance. It says weapons check. This is the south gate. South gate of the old West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, West Virginia. So we'll just drive around the back here. And this will be a good time to leave you. Now the last house you see, it'll be to the right. See right now when we're driving down this side, if you were to look to your right, there's an old building, an old house to the right. And you'll see that. I'll show you some pictures of it coming up here. It'll be the last pictures you see. I don't know for sure, but I believe that's probably where the warden lived, the warden's house. Now I guess this is the back of the penitentiary. Remember, this was going on in the 1800s. They probably had a horse stable. And there's still a lot of buildings in the back there you can't see, and they're not set up for tours. But I'm guessing the horse stables were back there, and hospital. Now, okay, here's the house, which I believe is the warden's house on the left there. You'll see some more pictures later. So thanks for joining me on this road trip to West Virginia.